Heidi Copeland. I'm a Family and Consumer Sciences Extension Agent with the University of Florida IFAS Extension. Today I'm going to talk to you about some intimidating creations made with pie crust, with puff pastry sheets, or with phyllo dough. Although they are all made with the same similar ingredients, flour, water, and a bit of fat, they all turn out quite differently. We're probably very, very familiar with pie crust. Sometimes you see that these referred to as short crust pastry. And short crust just means that there's a particular way to make it if you're making it from scratch. You are cutting in particles of fat so it makes short, irregular pieces of a combination of fat and flour. And that gives the dough its very flaky texture. Yeah, the stuff that you buy at the store is very similar to what you make yourself, with the exception of, do you like it savory or sweet? If you like your pie crust savory, check the label, make sure there's no sugar. If you like your pie crust with a little bit of sweetness, check your label, make sure there is some sugar. But a lot of pie crust, this is the particular one you buy in your refrigerated section, not in the freezer section of your store. I'm putting this on a piece of parchment paper, and as we see, it's already fairly large. This will fit really nicely into a 9-inch pie pan. But I'm going to roll it just a little bit larger because in case you don't have something like a 9-inch pie pan, you can do something called a free-form pie. The Italians call it a crostata. The French call it a galette. Either way, it's a delicious way to make a pie. Simply make a pie for your family. I could fill it with something sweet, like apples, or I could fill it with something savory, like this spinach mix. I'm choosing to fill it with something savory, like this spinach mix, and I'm just, I have some spinach that's was frozen, and I mixed it with some ingredients, cheese, egg, a little more cheese, and I'm putting it in the pie crust. I'm going to save some of this for something else in a minute. And I'm putting it to within about 2 inches of the edge of the pie crust. Then what I do is I simply fold it over and I make a very irregular kind of crust around the edge of my pie. I can choose to brush it with a beautiful egg to make it very golden, or I can do the same with a little bit of milk. I'm just going to leave it plain. But do you see how easy it is to move, picking it up on this parchment paper? And then I'm going to stick it in the oven about 375 degrees until it has my level of doneness. Put this in the oven. Okay. All right, and while that was baking, I took out another something I made earlier. This is called a spinach triangle, and it was made with phyllo dough. Phyllo dough is a very thin, flaky dough that you can see encases something very, in this instance, savory, a spinach and cheese mixture. People are intimidated by phyllo dough, and I can see why. It's a little bit difficult to use. Phyllo dough, you kind of have to pay attention and know where you buy it. This phyllo dough I bought at a little cultural market. It's a number 10. The phyllo dough is thicker, and so that's a very good thing for making something like the hand pie that I just showed you. The phyllo dough that I bought at a commercial grocery store is made by the same company under a different brand. Apollo, if you look closely, it says made by Athens. So they're made by the exact same company, but this does not have a numeric number on it that tells me what the phyllo dough, the thickness is. So as you can see, this is wrapped pretty tight, and there's good reason for that. Phyllo dough needs to be kept tightly wrapped so that air doesn't get to it, and it also needs to be covered when you're working with it. As you can see, it comes in two different packages, and it's I don't know how many layers, a lot of layers there. So while I'm working on my phyllo dough, can you excuse me for one moment? I forgot to get my cloth. While I'm working on my phyllo dough, I try to keep a cloth on top of what I'm not using, because that will keep it from drying out. But phyllo dough is very easy to use if you thaw it the way it says on the package and pay particular attention to that. But you lay down a sheet of phyllo, you brush it with oil or butter. You don't have to have every square inch covered, and then you cover it with another. I know from experience that 2 pieces of phyllo for what I'm doing is fine. You might have something else to do with it. I'm going to make a strudel out of my phyllo right here. And so I've taken my apples, I've cut them up. I'm going to sprinkle them just with a little bit of flour. You can use breadcrumbs, you can use cornstarch, and I'm going to roll it. And you see how I just rolled it up. Oop. Even if it breaks, it's not a big deal. So then I can put this directly on my pan, and this is something in my family that we eat, being Austrian. And again, this just goes into a hot oven about 400 degrees. We can bake at the same time as that pie, and voila, we're done. The next thing I'm going to make is I'm going to just, again, drizzle some fat on here. I'm using butter, and I'm going to carefully, can you see how this is, it's very hard, sometimes the pieces stick together, and I know from experience that the thing that aggravates me the most is to buy a box of phyllo and have it all stick together. Sometimes I can say, well, maybe that was my fault, I didn't thaw it properly, and other times, I don't know, it's just the box. So again, this time I'm going to lay 3 layers down, all right? And so while I have this on here, I'm going to cover my other sheet back up so that it stays nice and dry. And I'm going to, now, the same mixture I just put into the pie, I am going to put on my phyllo. And I'm going to do a great big one just for demo purposes. You can make these small, you can make these big, but this is a very easy thing to do. You fold it over, then you fold it like this, and like this, and all of a sudden you have that triangle that I showed you earlier. Then I can put that in the oven, and I can bake it. Another really tasty thing to do with phyllo is there's a lot of Middle Eastern. There's also some Eastern European dishes that are made with phyllo. One of the things I recently had was called burek, and it was made with ground meat. And so when we think of like a shepherd's pie with potatoes or whatever, this was made with the phyllo as the starch in that particular dish. But you see how that
starts to stick together if we're not carefully controlling what we're doing. So, oops, there we go. In some cultures, they don't even use a brush. They pour it on and they just mix it, they move it around with the hand. And so there's all kinds of recipes out there for phyllo. I'm cutting this now into 8, just kind of eyeballing it into 8 sections, and I can put it in a cup and make a little cup, and that can be for a dessert, or you can even break an egg in here and just cook an egg or some other kind of filling for like a brunch, or you know, a side dish kind of thing. But you see how easily, you don't have to be neat about it. The phyllo will become nice and brown and crispy, and it will be like the container for a filling. I'm going to put the rest of my my doughy filling in one of them. We'll stick it in the oven, see how that turns out. Oh, maybe that can be enough for 2 in here. And so that would be something, again, you just kind of have to eyeball it to see how much goes in the container. And we're finishing up with puff pastry. Puff pastry is one of the 3 P's that we talked about earlier. It's a mixture of a paste mixture of flour and water, or maybe milk and water, and then you laminate the dough with butter. And it sounds very confusing, and it is. But if you want to make it yourself, there's some really great videos online, and I've had great success with it. But if you want to be quick about it, you can buy it at your favorite grocery store. Again, puff pastry comes frozen. It comes in a package. It has 2 sheets in the package, and you basically just take out what you need. I made something earlier, and I'm just taking, this is 2/3 of the sheet that's left. It comes in 3 little portions like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it, and I'm going to make 2 different things out of it. Number 1, I'm going to cut it just like that. I'm going to put it on my sheet pan with parchment paper. Just push it down just a little bit. And again, I'm following directions on the back of the box that tells me how long to thaw it in the refrigerator and how long to thaw it on the counter and what to do with it. This one I'm going to I cut up some apples. I'm making a sweet dessert. I am just going to put the apples on here and bake the apples in a little dessert on top of the pastry. I cut the apples fairly thin. I put a little sugar and cinnamon, and I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on them, and that will make the juice thicken just a little bit. The other piece, I'm going to just quickly show you how you can, using a rolling pin, you can make a square. And again, you can take those same apples, you can stick them in here, and you can do this with a savory filling as well. If I would have saved some of the spinach and cheese mixture, I could put this in here as well. But now I'm going to just make a little turnover like thing out of them. And I'm just pressing the sides together, trying to keep the apples inside the best I can. And one of the things with puff pastry is you want to try to make a couple slits in it to keep the steam in it. I don't have a fork handy, so I can just press this down with my handy knife, and I can either pick it up and put it back down on the paper, And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. I'm going to put a little bit more flour on it this time though, just to keep it from sticking. And again, I'm flattening it just a little bit. I'm putting my filling, and I guess that's one of the things we need to think about. You can't get too overzealous with the filling, because then that will tear, it will tear the dough as you're trying to press it together. So you do see these kind of things in the store, and they're fairly expensive. They're called turnovers. And again, if you buy your own dough, you can make them however you like. If you make your pastry dough, just follow the directions for making them. And then these get put into a hot oven, and I'll show you in a minute what they look like when they're done. Don't be distracted by using pie, puff, or phyllo pastries for your savory and sweet creations. As you can see here, phyllo dough was used to make this little spinach pocket. It's a very flaky, crusty, delicious snack. I used the pie pastry, or the pie crust, to make a cassata, or a galette. It's a free-form kind of savory pie. This too has spinach in it. And as you can see, one edge is much darker than the other. And that's the beauty of just an egg wash on a pastry crust. It makes a beautiful difference in the color. I used the puff pastry to make a little tartlet with just plain apples. And again, you can see just adding that little bit of a wash made a difference in the look of the crust. This one I cut open, and you can see that how nice and flaky and delicious this puff pastry is. I also used a little bit of blueberries on one, a puff pastry, and turned one into, this is phyllo, turned it into a strudel, which is a European concoction, and then used it in a little muffin tin and put in the same ingredients as in the pie. So again, pie crust, phyllo dough, and puff pastry are easy to use and can be found in your favorite grocery store. Thank you.